On this edition of The Best Times, we profile two Memphians and their organizations that are dedicated to preserving and protecting our history. We'll examine ways of coping with depression. And you'll find out how you can declutter your life. Funding for The Best Times is provided by the Plough Foundation, striving to do the greatest good by helping the greatest number of people since 1964. Additional funding is provided by the members of WKNO. Thank you. Hello, I'm Chris Hardaway. Welcome to this edition of The Best Times, a series that looks at life after 50. I ran across an interesting quote the other day from William Murtaugh, the first keeper of the National Register of Historic Places. He said, "At its best, preservation engages the past in a conversation with the present over a mutual concern for the future." Tonight on The Best Times, we profile two Memphians who head two very different organizations that are dedicated to leading the conversation in protecting and preserving our resources and our heritage.
Our buildings shape who we are.
June West loves buildings, particularly old buildings with a history. Perhaps it comes naturally to her. She was a sculpture major in college, but then began working with the elderly, building senior living facilities and operating them, all of which led to her role as executive director of Memphis Heritage.
I think it relates to all things old have merit and value, and I didn't think it would translate into historic buildings, but somehow I think that has a role in it, that all things aging or older are important to me.
Memphis Heritage is a 40-year-old nonprofit organization that focuses on historic preservation and acts as an advocate for our architectural history.
I think people classify historic preservation in some circles as a dirty word because it means slowing down progress. You're putting you're slowing things. You're creating a roadblock to something new. Being new does not necessarily make it better, and I think we saw that during urban renewal in the 60s when everybody thought we have to get rid of the old and put in the new so everybody's brand new in a new society and the whole that concept. And I think we're finally going full circle, and that's what brings me great joy.
Memphis Heritage doesn't have the money to buy old buildings. Instead, June tries to be a catalyst for preservation by helping real estate developers put old buildings to modern uses.
Our agenda is to help the community create ways to preserve buildings and make a business, make it profitable, make it tell developers the ins and outs of historic building credits and tax credits and things like that. I equate us to the little fire lighter that you use to start your charcoal. We're that spark that sees it as our responsibility to bring it to the community and to get support or lack of support, but basically to put it out there and see where it needs to go.
Historic preservation can take many forms. On Broad Street, June worked with the owner of the Bounty restaurant to rebuild the entire western facade of the building instead of demolishing it, thereby preserving the historic character of the neighborhood. A few years ago, members of the Union Avenue United Methodist Church asked Memphis Heritage to step in and help save their church. Unfortunately, no other buyers willing to preserve the property as a church could meet the asking price, so today a CVS pharmacy sits on that corner. But just a couple of blocks away is one of June's major successes, Overton Square.
I think I would say it was kind of a turning point for us, because we had out-of-town owners that didn't really understand Memphis, didn't understand Overton Square, how it was in the 70s, didn't have a concept of what Midtown energy was like. If you were to remove it from Midtown and put something like a parking lot and a box grocery store in that area, can you imagine what the feel would be like as you drove down Madison and made the right on Cooper? I mean, it would just, you know, it would just not only shock us, but it would change our feelings. It would change how we felt about Midtown.
Today, Overton Square is thriving once again, and that is due in part to the dedication and passion of June West.
I've always felt dedicated to what I did, whether it be taking care of older people, seniors, or doing what I do today. But I think it leaves a footprint, and I think it's very, very important to get people excited about it and to have them understand the value of why we do what we do.
Currently, Memphis Heritage is in the midst of a capital campaign to raise $3 million for their New Century Fund, which will reshape the organization's future.
We will become a funding agency. We will start giving out grants, not buying buildings, but we will start supplementing programs that need our help to maintain historic properties.
As June says, not every old building is worth saving. But when you look at these photos of what was then and what is now, you may be able to see what June West sees, the value of preserving our history.
If you are in an environment that makes you feel something, gives you a spirit, gives you a sense of place, that is valuable to the community. It's valuable to generations to come. If we get rid of that, if we don't have the actual structure in which something occurred, or see the artistic ability of craftsmen back in the era of the late 1800s, early 1900s, we're losing that, and we can't afford to do that, because if you forget how you've done it, what you've done, your future isn't going to be very successful.
Water is very important to our health, but it's also very important to our economy.
This is the ghost section of the Wolf River. Yes, it's the same muddy, slow-flowing river you drive across on Summer Avenue or Walnut Grove. But here, near Moscow, Tennessee, the Wolf River has been protected and preserved for the last 20 years by the Wolf River Conservancy. Keith Cole is the executive director of the Conservancy.
The mission that we have today is really protecting land and water for future generations.
The drinking water that comes out of our faucets has traveled from an aquifer about 1,000 feet below our feet. The water in this glass could be as much as 2,000 years old, and it began its journey in the wetlands of the Wolf River.
It has been estimated that the water supply that we sit on top of could last us for the next 500 years. That's great, but what we also have to keep in mind is we have to protect that water. And so the lands that we protect, primarily floodplains and wetlands, we protect those lands so we don't have breaches in the aquifer system, that we don't have the wrong chemicals or pollution going into the water that will ultimately could affect our aquifer system.
The Conservancy is a land trust. Of the 500,000 acres that comprise the Wolf River, the Conservancy has protected almost 15,000 acres through conservation easements, land donations, or outright purchase of property.
We at the Conservancy, we have what we call the land prioritization conservation schedule, and it's based on a number of environmental factors where we have ranked 10,000 land parcels in the Wolf River watershed on their conservation value. So we actually have them prioritized, so we know if lands come for sale or to be donated, where they are in the pecking order for us as far as their value.
Keith Cole came to the nonprofit sector from the world of retail business, having owned the Blockbuster franchise covering a 4-state area. He brings over 20 years of business and leadership experience to his role at the Conservancy. Going from the corporate world to conservation has given him a new sense of purpose.
I enjoyed my business life. It was great fun. I think we built a great company. This is different. Again, it's a responsibility to something a lot larger than me, and frankly, in many ways, a lot larger than the Wolf River Conservancy.
Currently, the Conservancy is focusing on a new project, the Wolf River Greenway. This $40 million project will create a corridor of protected green space along the Wolf from downtown Memphis to Germantown and Collierville.
The Greenway provides a number of benefits. One benefit is transportation. As we build out the Greenway, you'll be able to travel without getting on City Street on a bicycle or walk from point A to point B, downtown, all the way out to Shelby Farms Park very safely. Also with that is the health aspects that come from recreation, but also with that is the economic benefit. You know, if you look at the current Shelby Farms Green Line, look down on the western end in the Tillman area, you're seeing new development in Tillman. That's a good example. There's examples of this all across the country where these Greenway type projects will help improve economic development in an area both on commercial aspect and also residential.
Gliding down the ghost section of the Wolf River, you get a sense of what this land was like 500 years ago. In the 17th century, French explorers called it the Blackbird River. What they saw then, we can see now. And thanks to the Wolf River Conservancy, future generations can have that same timeless experience.
The real importance is the next 30 years. The lands that we're protecting now. As our city grows, as there's development, and we're all for development. We call it smart development, green infrastructure. Protecting those lands that need to be protected for all the right reasons is really protecting lands for future generations.
About 25% of people over 65 suffer some form of depression, and more than half of doctor visits by older Americans involve complaints of emotional distress, which is one reason why the Journal of the American Geriatric Society has cited depression as one of the major causes of the decline in health-related quality of life for seniors. I sat down with Dr. Paul Hill of the University of Tennessee Department of Psychiatry to talk about ways of coping with depression. Dr. Hill, we all experience sadness in our lives, and there are times where we call ourselves depressed, but what is depression?
Depression is a mood state where you have lost the normal feeling of emotional reactivity, where you're not having any fun in life, your energy's low, your focus of your thoughts are negative, and you're just generally not having any fun.
You're in a funk and you can't get out of it.
Can't get out of it.
Can't get out of it. Is age a factor in this?
Age is a factor in this because, of course, the longer that we live, the more likely that we're going to have an episode of depression. But having your first episode of depression in late life is uncommon, as opposed to having a recurrence of depression, which is very common.
Now, are there different types of depression?
Yes, there's lots of different kinds of depression. The first type of depression that we all know about is we know about a depression that follows a very stressful life event or a loss of something that's important to us. Clinical depression, where people begin having symptoms of depression without any clear trigger. There's no stress, there's no loss, there's no serious life event. They just begin to have these symptoms and they kind of come out of the blue and they're not triggered by anything that they can tell.
Let's talk about those symptoms. What are they?
The symptoms that any age adult can have are sadness, tearfulness, negative focus in terms of what they're choosing to focus on in their mind, physical symptoms like fatigue, sleep change, appetite change. One of the main symptoms is people lose pleasure in the things that they normally enjoy. And of course, a very serious emotional symptom of depression is where someone begins to think that their life isn't worth living anymore, and that they would be better off if they were dead, or they and their family might be better off if they would end their life in suicide.
Is there a difference between depression in older people versus younger?
Older adults experience depression in more of a physical way, where they've felt like they've lost their vitality, that their physical symptoms begin to be amplified. They might have headaches, sleep problems, appetite loss.
For a friend or family member, it makes it difficult to recognize those symptoms. You may think, well, this person they've got a bad case of arthritis, or they're sick, or they're slipping into dementia, when in fact it could be depression, correct?
Correct. For family members, it's important to recognize that the older adult with depression, they have the appearance of being sad, and they have the appearance of feeling tired, but the patient or the older adult may not feel some intensity of sadness. And so a lot of family members might think, well, Dad's just in denial. He won't admit that he's depressed. Well, he may not actually feel depressed. He may just feel tired and achy and not having any fun in life. And he may not feel the feeling of depression, and it's not purposeful on the older adult's part to not feel that emotional change.
Among older adults, is there a difference between men and women?
The difference mainly has to do with the incidence of depression. We know that men have less depression in late life than women do. So women have a higher rate of depression, but fortunately, women feel those depressive symptoms and they'll seek help for those. And men frequently will never be aware that they have clinical depression and won't seek help for that.
Well, let's talk about the solutions here. What sort of medications exist to deal with depression?
There are many classes of antidepressants that are available for older adults to take. The most common antidepressant that's prescribed in the elderly population is sertraline. It's an SSRI, followed by citalopram, paroxetine, escitalopram, and citalopram. Those are all SSRIs. They're very well tolerated, and they're effective for the depressive symptoms that go along with the depressive episode. So the doctor has many different options to treat the whole symptoms that are occurring during that episode of depression.
Are there ways that an individual can work to prevent or at least mitigate depression?
Yes, there is. Of course, if you have a clinical depression, let's say your thyroid is in failure and you're having depressive symptoms as a result of that, it's pretty hard to act your way into feeling better if you don't have enough thyroid hormone in your body. But for the most common kind of depression, which is a stress-induced depression or a life loss or a change in your life setting, like you've retired or you've made a major move, the way to prevent having an episode of depression is to stay engaged with other people. Stay active, stay connected, continue to exercise. We know that exercise is good for your body, it's really good for your brain, it's especially good for helping ward off depression. Become a better sleeper. The importance of sleep in terms of preventing depression can't be overstated, because many of us get out of our normal life routine, and We should continue to focus on sleeping 8 hours a night during the evening hours, not during the daytime. And so sleep is really important. Continuing to have mentally stimulating activities like taking a continuing education class, or learning to do something new, or being engaged at your church or synagogue, being a volunteer. All those things can help ward off an episode of depression.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Dr. Hill, for being on The Best Times. There is a Finnish proverb that says, happiness is a place between too little and too much. Take a look in your closet, or that junk drawer in your desk, or the attic. Most of us live in a place that has too much. Clutter can make our homes and our lives more complicated and less happy. Maybe you could use a few tips on ways you can declutter your life. It seems as though many of the things we accumulate in life never disappear. They just go in the back of the closet, or cabinet, or drawer, or attic. Clutter can slowly creep up on all of us.
You know, there's clutter that doesn't clutter your life. You know, there's clutter that, okay, maybe you have a lot of stuff on your kitchen counter, but it doesn't, you know, you use it and it's not in your way. But when you sit down to go do something and you can't find something, then you have clutter that's a little bit more disruptive to your life.
Clutter can get to the point where the question becomes, do you own the stuff, or does the stuff own you? At that psychological crossroads, Esther offers 2 bits of wisdom.
You know, there's 2 issues here. It's a matter of letting go, and it's a matter of believing that it's not as overwhelming. For some people, it's just the fact that it's just so overwhelming. I don't know where to start. I'm okay. I know I don't need this stuff, but I'm just so overwhelmed. And the only advice I can give you for that is you just got to pick up the first box.
Once Esther's client has agreed to the process of letting go of their stuff, she begins with 1 room, or sometimes just 1 closet.
So you start with the easiest room for them and say, okay, what thing in your house do you feel will be the easiest for you to get rid of? Let's say you're doing a toy closet and everything comes out of the toy closet. That's the first thing that happens. Anything that is totally not working goes in the garbage. So that's the easy one, okay? And anything that you're going to keep, I don't put it like, I immediately put it back in the closet. Maybe that's not where it's gonna stay. But as you do that, you see how much room you have. And they start seeing, wow, I have so much more room and this is so much more organized. So as the process goes and they see that this isn't as painful as they thought it would be, it becomes a lot easier.
The clothes closet is often ground zero for clutter in the home.
Take a closet at a time and go through your clothes. And just do it by size, do it by color, do it by season, do however you want to do, but and just get it out of your house, because it just makes it so much more manageable. If you haven't worn it in 2 seasons, it's time to get rid of it. So, you know, every season you should look back and see. And if you're on a diet and you know you're going to lose a lot of weight, don't say, I'm going to save this because I'm going to fit into it and I'm going to have this whole closet full of clothes. No, you're going to deserve a whole new wardrobe. So get rid of it.
And then there's the stuff in the attic.
Well, if you have stuff in the attic that has not been used for 5 years, donate it. You will never use it. Don't save it for your great-grandchildren. They're not going to want it. That's the reality.
Esther's strategy of tackling 1 room at a time and replacing the clutter with organization will make your home and your life a happier place.
There was one woman that I worked with who she at one point was cleaning one room and we were working on it and she became frazzled. She said, I can't do this right now. And she had really progressed and done a lot in her house. And I said, okay, fine. And we moved to another room, and about 2 weeks later, we went back to that room, and she threw, and she threw, and she threw, and she threw. She just threw stuff out. She had gotten to the point of realizing her life was going to be so much more manageable if everything just wasn't all over the place.
Want more information about life after 50? Go to our website, wkno.org/besttimes. And send us your feedback and story ideas to besttimes@wkno.org. That's all for this edition of The Best Times. Please join us next week for more stories about life after 50. Until then, I'm Chris Hardaway. Thanks for watching. Good night. Funding for The Best Times is provided by the Plow Foundation, striving to do the greatest good by helping the greatest number of people since 1964. Additional funding is provided by the members of WKNO. Thank you.